Of the great offices in this state, the presidency is the only one directly elected by you. Tonight, the two people who could next hold that office tell us why you should choose them to be your president.
The office of Uachtaráin Ó HÉireann belongs to the people. Just 9 others in our history have been elected to the role of president. Each occupant has left a distinct imprint, and they have each reshaped how we understand the role of our head of state.
Tonight, the question returns to you. What kind of president do the people of Ireland want now? And which of the two candidates with us here tonight will become the 10th president of Ireland?
Hello and welcome to the primetime presidential debate. Joining us in studio tonight are independent candidate Catherine Connolly and Fine Gael candidate Heather Humphreys.
Catherine and Heather, you're both very welcome to the primetime debate this evening. Now, this is a debate, so we welcome lots of engagement and we also have lots of questions for you both.
Listen, we're going to begin. Let me begin with you, Heather. It's a straight choice here for the voter. Tell them tonight why you would be a better president than the woman standing beside you.
Thank you, Miriam. And just before I answer the question, can I just say that what we're seeing unfolding on our television screens this evening is absolutely awful. We're seeing members of our Garda Síochána being attacked with stones and with such things. And can I just say that if anybody knows anybody at those riots tonight, please tell them to go home. This is not what we are as a country.
And we're going to come back to that subject.
Thank you. I want to be president of this country because I want to be a president that will unite people.
But why would you be better than the woman standing beside you?
Yeah. Well, I bring a lot of experience to this job, and I know there are many people at home tonight that are wondering why there are only 2 people on this ticket, and indeed we're wondering that ourselves. Why there hasn't been more, and that's something that has been part of this process. And people, I would say to people who are thinking of not voting, to please come out tonight and please come out on Friday and vote for me, because I bring a lot of experience to the job, and I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother, and I have 3 young grandchildren. And when I look at them, I want to see what kind of a country I want this to be. I want it to be an inclusive country. I want it to be a respectful country, and I wanted a country to be a country where they are safe. As I said, I bring a lot of experience. I'm a centre ground person. I'm a middle of the road person, like most Irish people. I'm not to the far left. I'm not to the far right. So I'm saying to the people at home tonight, please consider me to be your next president, and I promise that I will not let you down. I do not promise perfection, but what I do promise is I promise honesty, I promise compassion, and I promise service.
OK. Catherine, why would you be a better choice of president, as people watch tonight, who'll be out voting on Friday, than Heather, who stands beside you?
Yeah, I think it's historic in the first instance that there are 4 women here, 2 interferers and 2 female candidates, and that should be recognised. And I look forward to serving as president of this country. It will be an absolute privilege to do that. And I say to the people who are listening and watching that I'll do so with humility and with pride. And I will serve the people of Ireland to the best of my ability. What makes me different? Well, all women find it difficult to say I, but I believe that I have the characteristics to make a president. I have the characteristics that reflect what people value in Ireland: care, compassion, solidarity, standing with those that have less or less well off than ourselves. I represent a different type of Ireland. Unfortunately, Heather is more of the same in relation to what the governments have done repeatedly over the years. I will be an absolute independent president with an independent mind, and I will take the vow 12-8, which obliges me to take a public and solemn vow to serve the welfare of the people of Ireland. And I will do that both in Irish and in English to the best of my ability, based on my record to date and the various roles that I've played.
Sarah.
Catherine, you've talked a lot on the campaign about being someone of courage and conviction, and this is one of the key issues that's arisen in recent days for both of you. You did work as a barrister for banks in repossession cases, but on the campaign you avoided answering questions about whether or not you worked as a barrister for banks in repossession cases. Why was that?
I've never avoided a question in my life. Actually, my life would be easier if I was less blunt and less straight and less direct.
One journalist asked you 7 times and you didn't answer.
I beg your pardon?
One journalist from the Irish Times asked you 7 times, did you do work for banks and repossession cases? And you said, I did all sorts of work.
I was asked to specify. I absolutely confirmed that I worked for credit institutions and for different clients. I was asked to specify, and I said I wouldn't do that. And the Bar Council have come out, and various experts have come out, and indeed the Minister for Justice has come out to say that we owe a duty of confidentiality though we should not be the same as our client. We shouldn't be identified with our clients.
Yeah,
it's very dangerous.
And I understand that point. I may put it to Heather in a second, but just on the point of transparency, and you as a president and transparency, you were asked the question. I'm giving you one instance where you were asked 7 times about whether or not you worked, not on specific cases, but for banks in repossession cases, and you didn't answer. I suppose the question to you is that the transparency we can expect from you as president?
You can expect openness and accountability from me as president. I work to the best of my professional ability as a barrister. I take my roles very seriously. I worked as a barrister for over 20 years and actually had a lot of different briefs from different clients. I have a duty of confidentiality. The court system is the court system, utterly different from the Seanad and the Dáil. Separation of powers. It is really important that we respect the independent bar and that we are not identified with our clients.
No lesser, let me put that to Heather Humphreys,
than the Minister for...
raising that.
I just want to finish. No lesser,
briefly, please, yeah.
No lesser the person than the Minister for Justice. The current Minister for Justice has clarified that better than I could clarify.
And indeed that's true, isn't it, Heather Humphreys? Jim O'Callaghan has mentioned it, the Bar Council has said it, that this is a wrong-headed attack that you put out at the weekend.
Yeah, well, I'm not asking Catherine to breach any confidentiality. I'm asking Catherine a very straight question. Did she represent banks in helping them to repossess Irish homes? That's the question. And I think Catherine needs to explain, as a politician, we have to be straight, we have to speak up and we have to tell people our position. So, the job of a barrister, I absolutely respect it, but we also have a job to do as politicians, and that's to tell people.
She has been straight?
Yeah.
She has spoken
up? She needs to... Catherine actually spoke in Galway City Council. She spoke against the banks. She said that the banks should... she spoke against repossessions. She also said the banks were criminals, and she said that in the Dáil. So Catherine needs to explain to people why, on one hand, she was representing the banks to repossess Irish homes, and on the other hand, she was standing up in a public fora and saying this should not be happening.
This is extraordinary allegations. I worked professionally as a barrister. When I was elected in 2016, I made a very conscious decision to leave behind my job as a barrister, and I took leave of absence, and then I left the profession completely. Although the wittier in the profession tell me you can't leave that club ever. Orders for possession are made in a court of law or in a county registrar's court. It has nothing to do with the barrister. The barrister represents the client as best they can, whatever that client is. It is the court that makes a decision. And the courts
So do you think Heather is being straight here?
The courts were making decisions based on government policy that allowed banks bail them out and allowed them go down and repossess when they could. My personal experience is that county registrars and judges bent over backwards to avoid, that's simply my personal experience, to avoid giving orders for possession. The people responsible are the successive governments that refused, except for a very brief period, to put a ban on evictions. Repeatedly, Heather, as part of the government, has refused repeatedly to agree with motions put by various members of the opposition to have a ban on evictions.
Heather, would you like to respond?
Yeah, well, Catherine is, she's evading the question. It's a very simple question. Catherine, did you represent banks and work on their behalf to repossess Irish homes? That's the question.
I think, let me see if we can get an answer, because I think you did answer that in a previous debate, but I think you said yes. Is that correct?
Absolutely said yes. I represented credit
All right.
institutions.
Does that satisfy you, Heather Humphreys?
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. There's nothing wrong with acting as a barrister and representing people. That's the job of a barrister. That's absolutely. But I wish Catherine had said that much sooner. But she was standing up in Galway City Council and she was castigating those same banks while at the same time she was representing them. And that, to me, is speaking out of both sides of your mouth. That is double standards.
Though, Heather Humphreys, you spent the last 3 days of this campaign talking about it in a major Sunday newspaper, an attack video going round, not talking about your own campaign, talking about Catherine Connolly.
Yeah.
Is that not quintessentially a smear campaign?
No, it certainly is not a smear campaign. And if you want to know about smear, we've all experienced what's happening on social media. Everybody sees what some of the very, very nasty things that have gone up on social media, particularly in relation to me and my family. There's been a lot
You're not accusing Catherine Connolly of anything?
Oh, absolutely not. But people from the far left are certainly putting this type of stuff on social media. And I don't know if you saw it, but it's very clear that there's a lot of people out there saying horrible things about me and my family, about my religion and about my traditions.
Catherine Connolly presumably has no control over that. Whereas you have control over what you and your campaign are saying. So it's a different thing, isn't it, when you're accused of a smear campaign?
No, I think I want to be very straight here. I have asked a very straight question. And Catherine, I wish she had answered that 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. She's saying now that she did represent banks. But I'm asking her, if she did represent banks, why did she not make that known whenever she was standing up in Galway City Council? That is the point here.
You've asked that, and I don't know, do you want to clarify that, Catherine? Why didn't you answer it at the beginning of the campaign when you were first asked?
I absolutely answered it and said I couldn't go into details in relation to what clients I represented.
No, nobody was asking you, Catherine, the names of your clients, to be very fair.
If I could, without interruption, please. I'm being accused of doing something that there's absolutely no basis to that. I repeat, I carried out each role I did to the best of my professional ability. To resort to this type of allegation is very low. And actually, if we were to ask the barristers in the Dáil what clients they represented, be an interesting outcome to that. But the independence of the bar, the separation of powers and the non-identification with your client are vital. And Heather has said repeatedly that she listens. Heather can't hear that I've said the first time I was asked, yes, I represent accredited institutions and clients. Then I was asked to be specific and I said, no, I can't go into those details.
Yeah. I think, it's just very important here to know that nobody asked Catherine to breach any confidentiality. She was asked a straight question,
made that point.
and I think that's fair. And everybody respects the work of a barrister. And Catherine chose to be a barrister. And Catherine, I'm sure, was an excellent barrister. I've no doubt about it, because she was employed to do this work.
OK, we're going to move on. We're going to move on to foreign affairs, because I suppose you both know more than anybody else, diplomacy, state visits, public engagements, both here and abroad. They're a vital part of the presidency. And I suppose they influence the perception of Ireland on a world stage. So let me begin, Catherine, with you here, if that's OK. In May, you said in the Dáil that Europe has completely lost any moral compass, if it ever had one. In February, you said there are countries we certainly cannot trust. America is one of those. And then you went on to mention England and France. The German ambassador has released statements concerned about your comments about their country. Have you ever thought, Catherine, if you do become president, what those comments might mean for our relations, I suppose, as a country, a small country, Ireland, with Europe and the European Union?
I think it's very important as a small country that we speak truth to power. And I made comments in relation to the lack of trust in those countries, in relation to the genocide unfolding before our eyes. And I think as a small country that's a post-colonial country, a history of famine and a resolution of the conflict in the north on a peaceful means, if we do not use our voice to call out genocide and allow the normalisation of genocide, we're in serious trouble. And I don't think it's what the people of Ireland want. I have no difficulty looking forward to serving as President of Ireland and using my voice in different ways, as diplomatically as possible, in compliance with the Constitution. But any sensible person in Ireland, anybody that stands and reads and looks at what's happening, would have to be concerned at the increasing money going into the militarisation of Europe. And that's the direction that we're going. And my views are shared by quite a number of people in Ireland at the increasing militarisation, while we cut back on welfare, we cut back on housing, and we cut back on other essential services.
But I suppose what many people watching tonight, Catherine, might worry about is many people do really believe in our relationship with Europe and the importance of the European Union for Ireland. And I suppose they might be concerned that you might say some of those things when you're president, such as that Europe has completely lost any moral compass, if it ever had one, the latter part being the strongest part there.
I think it's really important that we recognise what's happening in the world and use our voice. I don't think there's any fear at all that I will not fulfil my role as President as professionally and as humanely as possible. I worked as a Las Ceann and indeed on occasions as Ceann Comhairle when the Ceann Comhairle was unavailable. I have proven my ability to be able to serve in different roles to the best of my ability, and to do so in a very human way and use my listening skills. I have met various dignitaries. I met the former president, Joe Biden, a former president of America. I've met Frau von der Leyen.
Okay.
And I had serious concerns about American policy before President Trump, but I still fulfilled my role, met him, shook hands and led him around.
Heather, obviously when we hear Catherine there, she almost does a critique of Europe, but when you look and listen to what you said, you seem to just accept everything the EU says. Have you ever been critical of anything it's ever done?
Well, can I just say I am very pro-European. I always have been. Unlike Catherine, I voted for the various treaties. Catherine voted against every single treaty that was brought forward. I have been at many meetings of many ministers across Europe, and I understand the challenges and I understand the concerns and the fears of countries like Finland, of Lithuania, of Poland, regarding the Russian aggression that we're currently looking at. And we see that Russia has invaded Ukraine. But Europe is very important to us.
But can I just ask you, Heather, have you ever said anything critical about either European Union or Europe, even in relation to Ursula von der Leyen when she spoke about Gaza? You didn't criticise it then?
Well, actually, I feel that Europe should have acted sooner in terms of Gaza. I absolutely agree with that. But in terms, we are part of the European Union.
But have you ever been critical? Sorry.
I'm sure, yes, I have spoken up. Of course I have spoken up.
When?
But can I just say one thing? It was very important to us that we got the support of the 26 European countries whenever we were faced with Brexit. Brexit was a serious challenge to this country, and we were worried there was going to be a border between us and Northern Ireland. We didn't know how to deal with that.
But in terms of criticism, Heather, what have you spoken up on?
I've spoken up on various different things, possibly to do with maybe over-regulation in certain areas, that we felt that maybe this was too much. And I have raised my concerns. But as a minister, I have always raised those concerns at cabinet level, and there's many different issues that I have raised that I had concerns about. So but we are part of Europe, and I know the benefits of being in Europe.
Is there one you can tell us about, just as an example of something you really were quite critical of in terms of the European Union, that you weren't just saying as a slogan, I'm pro-European, so I accept everything?
No, I don't accept everything. And nobody does accept everything. That's what Europe is about. It's about trying to get consensus, about trying to get agreement. But I know from going on trade missions abroad, one of the biggest selling points we have is we are part of the European Union. When we go to other countries, we say Ireland allows you access to a huge market of other people. And that's what attracts many companies to come to this country, is because of our membership of the EU. And it has served us well. And it has been a wonderful peace process, as has been said.
OK, we'll leave that section then.
Yeah, well, we're staying with the issue of foreign affairs because, Heather Humphreys, you've said that you believe there is a genocide in Gaza. Do you think the US has enabled that genocide?
Well, the US has actually, at this point in time, started to get the peace or a ceasefire, and I think that's very important because at the end of the day, what we want to see in Gaza is peace. We want the women who put their children to bed at night, we want them to know that when they wake up in the morning, their children are still going to be in their beds.
There's 67,000 people dead at a Conservative estimate, funded by US money, US weapons. Do you think the US has enabled genocide in Gaza?
Yeah, well, Ireland has always spoken up, and I was part of a government that recognised Palestine as a state. There was 30,000 people killed then, and I know Europe has been slow in reacting. I accept that.
None of that is the question, though. The question I think people at home might be interested in, because people do feel very strongly about this, the US role in what has happened in Gaza. What's your view on the US role in what has happened in Gaza?
Yeah, well, the US has been part of this process now, this peace that has come to Gaza, and of course it hasn't. It has been a very, very difficult time for everybody there. And yes, we did speak to our neighbours, and we have spoken to the US, and I'm glad that we are where we are now, because what happened in Gaza was wrong. Okay. I spoke to the young girls, 2 young girls from Gaza. They lost their 3 sisters, so it has been an absolutely terrible and horrific time for the people in Gaza, and we stand behind the people of Gaza in this country. Right. And I'm glad that I was part of a government that recognised the state of Palestine.
Thank you, Heather. Catherine, you've described in the past week the US President as a genocide enabler. You're very clear on where you stand in it. You would likely meet him if you were elected President. Would you say to him that you believed the US enabled genocide in Gaza?
As a President, I will meet anyone that the government invites into the country. That will be part of my role. But let me just deal with genocide for a minute, and let me deal with what Frau van der Leyen did. And she stood shoulder to shoulder with Netanyahu, and there's an arrest warrant out for that man. In relation to genocide, it was enabled and resourced by American money, along with other countries. And that genocide has continued, and you've mentioned a figure. And what we haven't mentioned are the amount of bodies still under the rubble. Yeah. And we haven't mentioned the history in relation to what happened.
So we have actually on this station covered what's happening in Gaza an awful lot. My question for you tonight and for listeners at home or viewers at home is, if you meet the US President, you said you will meet him, will you say what you've just said to me there?
Obviously, we're having a debate here. In relation to my role as President, it obviously depends on how I'm meeting them, what the subject is. So if I'm just have a passing like I had with Frau van der Leyen when she came to the Dáil, it was to bring her in. I actually had a few words in German with her. The same with former President Joe Biden. I wasn't engaging with them. My role as Lascian Corla was to meet them, to let them sign. And obviously...
So this would be different, wouldn't it? If you were the Irish President, Uachtar na hÉireann, meeting the US President, you would have more than a passing engagement.
It absolutely depends.
And the reason I'm pressing the point is because viewers at home will want to know, will they get the Catherine that they're seeing here tonight and your views on what the US role is in Gaza when she's President, or will it be a different Catherine? Which Catherine will it be?
It will be the President that represents the people of Ireland as best I can. And I think people are in no doubt that when I become President, with the votes on Friday, that it's a different role for me. It has come up, for example, in relation to signing legislation, which we might come back to.
And I do understand that. I do understand, right? But there will be people at home thinking, on the one hand, some people who will want to vote for you because you have said the US President has enabled genocide. Yes. And people at home be very worried about voting for you because you've said the US President has enabled genocide. And they will all be wondering, what will you say to his face on behalf of the Irish people, given how important the US is to the Irish economy? So can you give us a clear answer? What will you say to his face?
I'm giving you a clear answer, but it's a speculative question. And so it will absolutely depend on what's on the agenda for speaking. If it's just a meet and greet, then I will meet and greet. If the discussion is genocide, that's a completely different thing. But I doubt if that would be the discussion with the President coming here. I doubt if that would be on...
You doubt if Gaza would be on the agenda?
Absolutely would doubt, especially with the President who has a symbolic role in that sense of meeting someone and greeting them.
So you wouldn't expect political issues to arise then, really?
Not in the way that you're speculating that they would arise. Absolutely not. And I have no difficulty, and I will repeat, in fulfilling my role in meeting people. And I think, I've been out canvassing since July, and I've met different interest groups. I've been in schools, and what has come up repeatedly is say people with disability, and then I clarify that's a policy issue. And housing is a policy issue. And people understand that, but they just want to be heard. And equally on all the vigils and protests in relation to genocide in Palestine, people absolutely understand the role of a politician and then the role of a president. There's been no misunderstanding on my part or on people's part in relation to that.
Thank you.
OK, we're going to talk, I suppose, about personal judgment now. And some questions for you both. Heather, let's talk about Shane and Lucia O'Farrell. I mean, for people watching who may not know the story, Shane was a beautiful young 23-year-old man who was killed in a hit and run near his home in Carrickmacross. The driver who killed him had 40 convictions and he should have been in prison. Now, his mother, Lucia, has campaigned endlessly for her son. And yet you were her local representative, Heather. You were the TD in the area. And you never bothered to meet her in person.
Well, first of all, can I just say I have huge sympathy for the O'Farrell family and what they have come through. I did speak at length with Lucia, and when I was finished that phone conversation, I can tell you there was tears in my eyes because her son was around the same age as one of my children, and that could have been any of us. So my heart goes out to the O'Farrell family. And can I just say that I'm sorry that I wasn't able to deliver what they wanted. I really am sorry. I'm sorry they lost their son. And I'm glad they got a state apology. I really am. And they deserve that.
Heather, what this is about really, I suppose it's about personal judgment. A lot of people watching tonight, that's why they'll vote for one or the other of you. And I hear what you're saying, you're very sorry. And I think everyone will accept that. But the bottom line is that you didn't bother to meet this mother. She was in your area. Did you talk to ministers who you were working with? Did you petition on her behalf? And I mean, I know we're only journalists, but Lucia contacted me early in 2012 and she came in here to Primetime and we spoke to her with her daughter Gemma. So you say you want to be a president for all of the people, but you didn't meet such a deserving woman in your own constituency.
No, I did speak to her on a number of occasions. I wrote to ministers on her behalf. I wrote to Minister Shatter. I wrote to Minister Flanagan. I spoke to ministers and I did everything I could. And as I said, I'm sorry that I wasn't able to deliver for them what they wanted.
Do you think you failed her, Heather?
I did my best, and I'm really sorry if she, I'm really sorry that I wasn't able to deliver what they wanted. But I'm glad, I really am glad that they have got a state apology, and I'm sorry that that state apology wasn't given when I was part of the government.
When you look back on it now, Heather, why do you think you didn't meet Lucia?
I spoke to her on a number of occasions and I said, send me on the issues that you have. She sent them on to me and I made the representations on her behalf. I genuinely did. And I did send her out the correspondence that I received from the ministers at the time. So I did my best. And as I said, I'm sorry that I wasn't able to deliver what they wanted at the time.
And we all make mistakes, Heather, but in retrospect, do you think that was an error of judgment on your part?
Well, as I said, I am sorry for the O'Farrell family and what they have come through. Shane was a lovely young man and unfortunately he was killed by a motorist that should not have been on the road. So what can I say? Only I am very sorry, and I wish that I could say something or do something that would bring their son back.
Thank you for that. Catherine, your trip to Syria, you said it was a fact-finding mission, but when you went there, you met a pro-Assad businessman who was actually under EU sanctions, and then it transpired the man who showed you around one of the Palestinian refugee camps was part of a militia, and he had actually starved some of the refugees in that camp. Surely that was an appalling error of judgment.
Well, actually, I went to Syria on a fact-finding mission. I went with a group of 4 TDs, including myself, and a group of activists who had been active for a very long time in relation to the Palestinian refugee crisis. I flew into Beirut and went into Damascus, and I visited the very first visit to the Yarmouk refugee camp.
Now, that's not exactly what I'm trying to get at here. I hear you, and
Yes.
intentions might have been good. Was there naivety? I mean, the Irish Syria, you know, they feel, that group, that you were used by Assad's regime as a propaganda boost for them.
I was far from naive in relation to Assad's dictatorship. And we had no control over people who came in and out of our presence.
But did you know who you were going to meet, Catherine? I mean, did you ask beforehand?
We-
You're going to Syria to
we-
where Bashar al-Assad is running a dictatorship. Did you
Absolutely.
wonder who you were going to meet?
I was fully aware of Bashar al-Assad's regime, and indeed that regime was backed by Western powers and by America. Our own Taoiseach, when he was a minister, went over and visited there and met with Bashar al-Assad. I didn't do anything like that. And I'm not even making a comment on the current Taoiseach going over, except it's a fact that he actually went over and sat with Bashar al-Assad.
But Catherine, you went on that mission, as you say, as a fact-finding mission. First of all, what facts were you going to find from a pro-Assad businessman and a pro-Assad militia commander?
We met lots of people when we were there. Different people came in and out as we toured that, which was a city that was destroyed. And actually the destruction has left an absolute mark on me. We were shown around by one person in a bus. Where we stood for a while, there was a group of people that came in and out.
The person that's showing around was a member of the militia who had been starving some of the refugees.
I couldn't possibly endorse any action that was done by anybody on.
But did you ask who you were going to meet?
We went over to meet the refugees, and if I could we went around that camp, and the destruction was horrific. We didn't have any of those men in that bus going around. We went and met. Maureen O'Sullivan arranged a meeting with UNRWA in relation to the refugees. We met with Syrian Christians. We went into a hospital. We met with a nun. We saw the utter destruction that...
And I hear you, and clearly the intentions were incredibly good. But your picture, Catherine, appeared on Syrian state television. So was it an error of judgment, and was there a naivety
There was no
that you went there and met all these people you should not be in the company of?
There was no naivety on my part in relation to a dictatorship, the Syrian regime. I've never had any doubts about the Syrian dictatorship, unlike countries that supported it.
But in retrospect, do you regret that they could use it, that dictatorship which you abhor, they could use you and your image as a boost for their regime?
Any government can use an image. Similarly, when the current Taoiseach went, his photos appeared with Bashar al-Assad. That doesn't mean that the current Taoiseach, when he was minister, endorsed that regime. In fact, the contrary was said by him repeatedly. And so we'll go back to the refugees who sat and talked to us and did their best to explain the life of a refugee going back to the Nakba, 1948, generation after generation that could never return
Heather,
to
what
Palestine.
do you think of that trip?
Well, I'd just like to ask Catherine who organised the trip, and she was accompanied by Mick Wallace and Claire Daly, among others. So I'd just like to know who organised the trip, and the taxpayer paid for the trip. And Catherine said she was on a fact-finding mission.
Okay.
And I'd just like her to tell the taxpayer the facts around it.
First of all, we're all paid in taxpayers' money. Our salaries are paid in taxpayers' money. And second,
but you pay tax on your salary.
I didn't interrupt you at all. Okay. I didn't come back in relation to Lucy O'Farrell, and there are many things I could say on that. So I was asked, did I pay for it? And I paid for it through my parliamentary activities allowance. And under that allowance, there are different categories. One of them is research and policy. And I used some of that to fully finance the trip. it was absolutely educational. It deepened my
To
understanding.
answer Heather's question, and then I'm moving to Sarah. Who organised it?
A private citizen in Dublin who had previously organised many trips to the occupied territories, to the West Bank, over and over. A group of, I was with 4 TDs, including myself, Maureen O'Sullivan, whose name is repeatedly left out, and she's given me permission to use her name.
All right, thank you. Heather Humphreys, I'll come to yourself again. There's been some controversy about your decision as a minister to forward a letter advocating for a farmer in your constituency who is facing animal cruelty charges. Now, that case was later dropped. I know you have rejected claims of political interference. You say you abhor cruelty to animals, but you support fox hunting. The ISPCA has said in the past that fox hunting is a despicable form of deliberate cruelty to animals. So how does that make sense?
Well, fox hunting, among other things, is a rural pursuit. And I support rural pursuits and people who engage in them. I don't fox hunt. I've never been at a fox hunt. But that's part of our culture, it's part of our heritage, and it has been there for many, many years, and I support it.
Do you think it's cruelty to animals?
It's part of our heritage.
I understand that.
Yeah, well, cruelty to animals in my book is somewhat different to fox hunting. It's a rural pursuit, and foxes, there's a lot of foxes around, as we know, and people go hunting the foxes, and once the controls are in place and once the rules are abided by, I support rural pursuits.
Catherine, what do you think of that?
I have great difficulty with fox hunting. Although I do understand the context of it, I have great difficulty, and I've expressed my opinions in the Dáil in relation to it. And however, foxes are not a protected species, and that's a gap. They're not a protected species. They're also a threat in terms of wildlife, in terms of sheep, and so on. So I think we need to look at it in a slightly different, a broader lens as to how do we control foxes in a humane way? How do we do that? In terms of ecology and in terms of animal welfare.
So do you agree with Heather then when she says it's a rural pursuit? Very many people out there enjoy it as a sport.
No, I have a difficulty.
It's part of our tradition.
No, I don't agree with her on that. I have a huge difficulty with fox hunting for the sake of it. I'm putting it in a different perspective, that we should be looking at what needs to be done in terms of the ecological overall environment. How do we control foxes? They're not a protected species.
Okay. Heather, you say one of the reasons you support it is because it's been going on for hundreds of years. I mean, there's been lots of inhumane traditions that have gone on for hundreds of years, and people have stopped them because they realise they're cruel. Have you given it any thought beyond that?
Well, as I said, it is a rural pursuit. No minister has banned it, and nobody has come forward with proposals to ban it.
I think there's legislation going through the Dáil at the moment.
Well, I don't know. I'm not aware of that. But what I can say is that it has it's something that rural people have participated in for generations.
No, I do. I understand you made that point. But
yeah, but what I'm saying
is that the only reason you support it? Because we've always done it.
No, well, it is a pursuit. It's a rural pursuit, and people participate in it. But there's a lot of rules around it. There's a lot of regulations around it. And I have to agree with Catherine because, like foxes are not a protected species. Foxes can do a lot of damage, particularly on farms, and particularly when it comes to young lambs. I said that earlier today. There's a lot of damage.
They had the same problems in
do.
the UK, but they banned it in the UK and managed it in a different way.
Yeah. Well, as I say, if it's a decision of the government of the day to ban fox hunting, that's a matter for them. As president, as president, I want to speak up for rural Ireland. I'm from rural Ireland, and I want to highlight all the good things about rural Ireland, and there's so many good things there. So as president, that's what I want to do, and I want to make sure that farmers and rural people are recognised and valued for the huge contribution that they make to this country.
Okay, Catherine.
I think there are many, many challenges to sustainable living in rural areas. I think we have failed to have balanced regional and rural development. We have policies that haven't been implemented. As I travel the country, from Donegal down to Cork and across the country, the same themes emerge all the time. Lack of infrastructure in rural areas. I think of a town in Connemara that can't have houses because there's no sewage treatment plant. And I have gone to almost every agricultural show during my campaign. And the same themes emerge. The failure to have proper regional development, proper balanced
Sorry, briefly,
regional...
Heather, you want to get in?
Yes, OK. Well, I've been around the country as well. And do you know what I have realised? This is a great country and there's a lot of positivity in rural Ireland. And I was delighted when I was the Minister for Rural and Community Development to invest in community halls, to invest and repurpose old buildings, to turn them into remote working hubs so people could live and work in the rural areas. And do you know there'd be a lot more things in this country if people didn't object to them, whether it was sewage schemes or roads or such infrastructure. So I think people need to be careful on that.
The lack of infrastructure is not due to people objecting.
Well,
the lack of infrastructure is due to successive governments failing to roll out infrastructure. In the 21st century, I'm referring to a town in Connemara that cannot develop so that we can have a sustainable Gaeltacht because there's no sewage treatment.
All right, I want to move on if that's okay. And Catherine, I want to talk about your choice to hire someone who's convicted in the Special Criminal Court on firearms charges related to dissident republicanism. The gang she was part of was caught wearing wigs with cable ties, carrying 2 guns, one of which had been previously used in a murder. It's been well aired, you hired this person to work in the Oireachtas, and you've said multiple times you felt she has been completely rehabilitated. And this question isn't really about her at all, it's about you and your own judgment. Because you're very clear that you see yourself as the candidate for peace, that you abhor violence. So did you ask her, or does it matter to you what she intended to do with those guns?
Of course it mattered. The Special Criminal Court gave a conviction, gave a prison sentence. She served that prison sentence, not in its entirety, because she was absolutely a model prisoner. When she came recommended to me, I spoke with the person who recommended her. Eamon O'Keefe, former minister, former TD, had absolutely no hesitation in giving her the highest recommendation. This is a former minister in TD who was part of the committee that visited.
I understand that. The question is,
important
though, I think a lot of people, if they've been paying attention at all over the last couple of weeks, will have heard that Eamon O'Keefe was the person who recommended her to you. The question is, did you talk to her about what she intended to do with those guns?
No, she had already been convicted in the court. She had served her prison sentence and she was rehabilitated. My judgment was in relation to taking on this woman for a brief period of time, in any event, regardless. And she came highly qualified for the job. And this issue goes to the heart of what rehabilitation is. What do we mean what do we mean when we say rehabilitation? And we've seen, as a result of this story, the Irish Penal Reform Trust coming out and various people who haven't been given a second chance and the barriers and the obstacles that are there preventing somebody who has served a prison sentence from reintegrating into society.
All right, Heather Humphreys.
Well, first of all, can I say that you can't have rehabilitation without accountability. And this particular person we still don't know what she was going to do with the guns. And she was a member of IRIGI. That is an organisation that wants to pull down the Good Friday Agreement.
It's a registered political organisation.
It is, but it's still an organisation that wants to pull down the Good Friday Agreement. So what we need to know is why did this woman get access to our national parliament, to Dáil Éireann, without the necessary Garda clearance? And that is a serious risk. It was a serious risk, in my view, to our national parliament. But the question here remains...
So does that go back to your judgment, Catherine Connolly? And plenty of people have raised the same question that Heather Humphreys is raising. Your judgment in allowing that person in without being fully Garda vetted, and that Garda vetting taking an awful long time.
I think Heather has agreed that the signing in and out of someone is a normal procedure.
Yeah, normal for a week or two, Catherine, not for 6 months.
I think on the last occasion, Heather, you said 3 weeks. So
well,
now
3 weeks.
We're now accepting that it's a normal procedure while the vetting, while the application to be is ongoing. And so we now have accepted that. Nobody raised that this woman was a risk. Nobody raised it with the Ceann Comhairle or with the houses of the Oireachtas. I knew the application was being processed. It wasn't convenient at all in the sense that it was taken so long.
And can I ask Heather Humphreys about the points that you've been making, Catherine Connolly, about rehabilitation? Because I know, Heather, you said you are fully supportive, obviously, of rehabilitation. So would you hire somebody with a previous conviction, robbery, assault? Is there a crime that you wouldn't hire somebody for? Where's the line for you?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't hire a convicted rapist in the Dáil or in Áras an Uachtaráin, and that's for sure. And there's no equivocation on that. I said that out very, very clearly.
Okay, so is that it? Would you hire somebody such as what Catherine Connolly has described, who has been through the Special Criminal Court, served her time, is being rehabilitated, recommended to you by a fellow TD?
Yeah, well, I think there's an appropriate place to rehabilitate people, but they must admit that they made a mistake. You can't have rehabilitation without admitting that you did wrong. I have never heard that this particular person has said she did wrong. She pleaded not guilty.
Okay.
And I think it's important to say that you can have rehabilitation, but I don't think that our national parliament or Dáil Éireann is the place to rehabilitate somebody who was convicted by the Special Criminal Court of possession of firearms.
So even if this person had said, I'm sorry, I did wrong, you still wouldn't have hired her?
Well, I think we have to, everything is commensurate, and I think it's important that somebody like that would get an opportunity in a place that was less sensitive than Dáil Éireann, because you know it contains a lot of very confidential information. A lot of very serious decisions are made in our parliament, and I think it's someplace that you need to be very aware of security.
Does Heather have a point, Catherine?
You know, TDs sign in people all the time. I signed her in and signed her out. I vouch for her. I'm with her. She can't walk around the Dáil on her own. It's not allowed when you're signing somebody in.
So she was with you 24 hours of the day, or every hour that you were in there?
Just let me explain. She can't walk around the Dáil on her own. She gets a pass every single day. She has to be accompanied by me going around. She has to be in my office. She cannot walk around the Dáil. In relation to...
She has a pass, Catherine. She has access to the Dáil now, in fairness.
In relation to risk, it's really important to point out, it has been said in the papers that she was a risk. No guards ever brought that to the attention of the houses of the Commission. No guards brought that to the attention of the Ceann Comhairle, ever. So here we have a woman who's a model of rehabilitation. She actually got out earlier because she was such a model. This was a woman who studied, which is not necessarily, but it's just an interesting fact.
So presumably you'd invite her to the Áras?
PhD.
You'd have no problem with that?
Who I invite to the Áras, I'll decide in due course. The first group to come to the Áras will be the carers. I've given a solemn promise. The second group to come to the Áras will be a school
but
that
this lady that we're discussing this evening, or somebody with a conviction of that sort?
That's speculation in the future. As president,
it's
I will
it's not really. It's a straight question.
As president, I will be inviting different people to the Áras and different groups, and that will absolutely depend on given recognition to groups on the ground, given recognition to carers, and I have various projects that I will be rolling out.
Okay, thank you.
OK, we're going to move on to a completely different subject. This is, Heather, on the Irish language. When you were Minister for the Gaeltacht, you said you'd learn it. Now, I know you're on the record saying that if you become President, you will learn it. But I suppose, why would people believe you'd learn it now if you didn't learn it before when you said you would?
Bawailam a bheith abalta níos mór Gaeilge a labhairt. I'd love to be able to speak more Irish. And I learned Irish the same as everybody else, and I went into the world of work. I didn't have an opportunity to use it, so like many things, you lose it. But I think my biggest problem is the confidence to speak Irish, the confidence to use the Gaelic and to use the language, because we're all afraid that we're going to say the wrong thing and we're going to look foolish. So I did go to the Gaeltacht, and it was certainly coming back to me. I was brushing up on my Irish. Then I moved to another department, and I was in the throes of Brexit, and then with many other issues relating to that time, which I worked very hard in trying to help businesses and support this country during Brexit. So what I would say is I commit to returning to the Gaeltacht, to returning to Donegal and learning Irish, because I'm very proud of our language, and it's an old language, and I do feel that the language can be used as a unifying force in this country, because we look at Ms Irvine in Northern Ireland, and again she is so fluent in Irish. And actually, when I was made the Minister for the Gaeltacht all those years ago, my church that I belong to gave me a Bible as Gaeilge. And I'd love to be able to read that Bible as Gaeilge. And I commit to learning Irish.
So was it just you were too busy to learn it? It wasn't a priority?
As I said, I did spend a week in the Gaeltacht and I absolutely enjoyed it. And I can speak Irish, but I'm not confident, and I would like people to come on a journey with me. There are many more people like me who learned it, and we're just hesitant about saying the right words at the right time in case we look foolish.
I mean, Catherine, tá Gaeilge Álín a tá Gaeilge Líofa agat, but an gapan tú go bhfuil sé tábhairteach go mbeidh Gaeilge ag uachtar an na hÉireann agus céim fá?
Ceapan go bhfuil sé Harbheith tábhairteach go mbeidh Gaeilge ag an céad uachtarán eile. Is í teanga efficúil na tíre é, is í an teanga is tábhairtaí ó thaobh éon míthuiscint maidir le leagan béarla agus leagan Gaeilge de éon dlí. Ach ní hé man nós caithfh nús ar gcuine tusk nach bhfuil Gaeilge acu. Ní hé sin an bealacha tá agam. I have never, ever criticised somebody for not having Irish.
And on that, actually, Catherine, the language can actually be weaponised, as we see north of the border, even at the moment on road signs. There's a huge divisiveness about the language for many people north of the border who don't feel it's their language. And also I was listening to a radio show this morning and there were people phoning in saying they are alienated by it because they feel they're so bad at talking it, that they feel they can't do it properly. And it also brings them back to their childhood when they found it impossible to learn. So there can be an alienating side of it for those of us who can speak it.
That's quite a long question and statement, so maybe I'll try and deal with it as best I can. First of all, I have never criticised someone for not using the Irish language. I myself learned it. I went back after school, and it was an absolute privilege to be able to do that in Galway and go back and learn it. Indeed, I'm still learning, and I think what I learned the most is to be able to recognise the mistakes but not to prevent them. So I understand the learning of Irish on every level. But this is about the role of the President of Ireland and the importance given to it in the Constitution, the Irish language. And so it is very important that the President would be able to use the language. But I'm not using that. I'm just giving, explaining, just sorry, in relation to the Irish language. We have come so far in Ireland on one level. We have finally got Achna Teanga Efagula that gives rights to people that haven't been implemented.
But Heather, on that, you obviously come from a different community from a lot of other people on this island. Do you feel it can be alienating or it can be weaponised in the way we see the street signs crisis up at the moment in the north?
Well, I feel it's an old language, and you know, Ulster Irish and Gaelic in Scotland is very, very similar. And I feel that given a bit more conversation, a deeper understanding, there's so much about that language that can actually unite us. And if I was elected president, I would try to bring people together. I would try to say to them that you see in history where the clergymen came from Scotland and they came into Ulster and they preached as Gaeilge or as Scottish Gaelic. And there's a unifying force there. And I really, really would like to work to bring that together.
I think there's a lack of understanding here in relation to, of course, it's one of the ancient languages in Europe, but it's actually the living language of quite a number of people in Ireland who are without services in Ireland. And of course...
break this. Very sorry for interrupting there, Catherine. We actually need to get to a break. After the break, we'll be discussing immigration, and then we'll have more key questions for our two candidates.
Who will be elected as the 10th President of Ireland? When the votes have been cast and the count begins, we'll bring you the news as it breaks across RTE television, radio and online. RTE, your public service media.
Can the girls in green overcome Belgium to reach the top tier of the Nations League? UEFA Women's Nations League playoff, Friday at 6:30 on RTE2 and RTE Player.
In anon túram coitianta gur tradiisiún de chuid Vercha í an town, sí an éirinne gur ascar sí ó chean tradiisiún na Gaeltach.
As the immigrants were coming in, they were really just looking for ways to hold on to their Irishness.
Agus leidí eile aimsithe nach rá féile na saona teoranta go héireann ach ochamóra sa rein chomá.
monsters, werewolves, emerge out of the other world.
Ia Hauna, an ancient mystery. Dé Downing ag le Hortaréis Seacht RTE1 agus RTE Player.
And you're very welcome back to the primetime presidential debate. And ladies, I want to talk to you now about immigration. Heather, I'll start with yourself. A lot of tension and unrest in City West this evening. You mentioned it at the start of the debate. The public order unit has been called. Unfortunately, it's not the first time we've seen scenes like this in recent years. So as president, how would you speak to all the people at times like this, many of whom actually feel like their concerns have been ignored?
Well, I want to be a president that brings people together, that breaks down those preconceived prejudices, those notions that people have in their head. And I really would want to use the Rs as a place where people can have safe conversations and to build bridges, because we live in a divisive society and it's important that people get the opportunity to see what other people are thinking, to understand and to have a better understanding of other people's cultures, other people's ideas. But can I just say, what we're seeing on the streets of Dublin tonight is absolutely horrific. We see the men and women of An Garda Síochána, they're being attacked and missiles are being thrown at them, fires are being started. This is wrong, and I would say to anybody listening tonight, if you know somebody that is at those riots, please, please, please ask them to go home. This is not what we are as a country. This is not what we are as a people. And this is wrong.
It's maybe at the tip of the iceberg and an indication of how unhappy a lot of people are, and a lot of people put the blame for that on the previous government, of which you were a part, and how you handled immigration.
Well, we need immigrants in this country. There's no question about that. We need people to work in our hospitals, to work in our care services, to work in many, many different parts of our economy. We need workers here. So I agree that people should be able to come here on work permits and come here legally. And that is, but for those people who shouldn't be here, who are coming here illegally, we need to process them quickly. And if they shouldn't be here, they need to go back to their own countries or where they came from.
Catherine Connolly, the same question to you. How would you speak to people tonight, if you were president, looking at the scenes that we're seeing on our television screens?
I think it's very upsetting, actually. And I've just had verbal reports. I haven't had time to read or see what's happening, but I've got detailed verbal reports, and it's very, very upsetting that we have hundreds of people gathered and that the public order unit is out from the guards. It's deeply disturbing, and I think it's time for leadership from politicians, and indeed as president, but I'm not president tonight, to use our voices to show leadership and to actually analyse what's happening here and stop conflating things. So we have a young girl who's been sexually assaulted.
We won't actually go into any details because somebody's been charged in that
just
case.
Just the reporting of it.
Yeah, and we won't mention the case at all. Thank you,
won't,
Catherine.
but just the reporting of it is deeply upsetting that this has happened. And of course our thoughts are with the girl and the family. That goes without saying. Secondly, then, we need a review, and I think the Minister for Education has called for a review because the girl in question was in state care.
All right.
In relation to division, I think we really need to be very careful in this country. We're a country of welcomes. And so I think different subjects have been conflated. We have the direct provision system, and then we have people coming into our country to work. And it's extremely difficult, actually, to get into the country. You have to get a work permit, and you go through the hoops to get it. So we need workers.
Thank you.
I beg your pardon.
Sorry, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. OK, Heather, in 4 days' time, you could be the president. At the moment in this country, the government has declared a national emergency in relation to climate change. Many people feel the homelessness and housing situation is already an emergency. Others are worried about the economy. So who you appoint, if you become president, your Council of State, will matter, will tell us a lot about your priorities. So what kind of people, with what kind of traits and in what kind of areas would you appoint to your Council of State?
Well, first of all, I would like to appoint more women to the Council of State, and I think that's important because every time I made appointments, I always tried to bring a 50-50 gender balance. So my first priority would be on women, and I know that there are many, many women out there who are very, very well qualified to sit on the Council of State. Obviously, the role of the Council of State is to advise the President on all things relating to the Constitution, so they would need skills in that area. But I do think that people who have expertise in climate change would be very, very useful. But apart from the Council of State, it's my plan to set up a Council of Youth. So that would be young people from representative organisations right across this country, representing youth groups, and they would speak directly to the President, these young people, so the President could speak on their behalf, and they could have that conversation on a very, very regular basis and advise the President on what the President should be speaking out on in terms of young people and how the President can represent young people. I also feel it's important that older people should get representation, and I want to be a voice for older people as well, because sometimes they feel left out and they feel that they're not being listened to. So that's I also would take that into consideration when I would be appointing the Council of State.
Have you any specific people in mind?
No, I haven't, to be honest, but I certainly will have. I know many people who are very well qualified in many different areas. Over my time as a minister, I was 10 years as a minister, and I met many wonderful women in all different walks of life, and I am sure I will have no difficulty finding the right skill set in that cohort.
And Catherine, the same question. And just to bring the viewers into it, I gave you more time there, Heather, because we have to give you both equal time, and you were slightly under there. So for you and your Council of State, so we would know your priorities, Catherine, what kind of people would you appoint to it?
First of all, the President can appoint 7 members to the Council of State under the Constitution. All the other members are already set out in the Constitution, the Supreme Court judge and so on. That's all set out. So you can appreciate it's been 3 months of hectic activity, and all my energy has gone in to the campaign. However, the Council of State will be absolutely vital to me as President, and I will be looking to have as diverse a range of people in those 7 appointees or nominees. Disability, quite clearly, diversity, young and not so young on that, bearing in mind that they will be advising the President on different areas. So I will be looking very, very carefully at the appointments.
Thanks for that, Catherine.
Heather, I want to ask you a final question to both of you, actually. The presidency, Heather, requires, as well as everything else, Catherine mentioned it at the beginning of the debate, humility. Can you think of something that you feel sorry about or have regret over?
Yes, I do, actually. When I was the minister during COVID, we took the medical advice on a number of different things. But what really strikes home really hits me hard is the fact that there were regulations there where when a relative was dying, you couldn't hold their hand, you couldn't whisper something in their ear, and that stays with me, and I regret that, I really do, because I think we could have found some way, because when a loved one is dying and you can't hold their hand and you can't sort of whisper something or maybe say those final words, I think we could have found a way around that, and I regret that. I genuinely do, and I think it's something that is not easy for the families that watch their loved ones dying and they were looking at them through a window. I think we could have found some way to deal with that.
OK, thank you, Heather. And the same question to you, Catherine.
Well, actually, Heather has touched on something that really upset me from day one, and I agreed with the government in relation to the restrictions.
Sorry, Catherine, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the question is about your own regrets.
Yeah, I actually regret agreeing with that, but I went because the fear was so extraordinary that I went with that. Afterwards, I did not give support to the government after that because the bond of trust was broken. They gave a commitment that would come back regularly in relation to the review of those restrictions, and that didn't happen. And I agree with Heather, except it was government policy. It was the most appalling thing to watch, that people in nursing homes...
So what is your own personal regret? I'm not clear.
My personal regret is that I agreed in the first place to the restrictions.
Okay.
Absolutely. I did it on good faith, and I actually articulated that in the Dáil, that I did it on good faith. And when the trust was broken after that, because I watched what was happening with nursing homes.
Okay.
Can I just come in to say that we followed the medical advice, but I just feel that we could have found a way to do it differently.
I agree, and the most important thing
I
is
understand.
that we learn from it. We
Ladies.
learn from it for the next time that we have the same crisis.
Thank you both so much for your time this evening. And indeed, that is it from us for tonight. Straight after this, live on RTE News Channel, YouTube and on TikTok, the RTE Behind the Story podcast team will have live reaction to the debate that you have just watched.
For now, though, from Sarah, myself, from everyone on our primetime team, from the two candidates, we wish them both the very best of luck on Friday. Thank you all very much for watching, and Ihawa.